The blood on Violet's feet had dried dark against the Colorado dust, but she kept walking because there was nothing else to do and nowhere else to go. She had walked from the mining camp where her father died 3 days ago, walked until the town of Sheridan. Wyoming appeared like a mirage through the heat shimmer of late August 1876, and she would have kept walking straight through it if the massive shape of a man hadn't stepped directly into her path outside the general store. "You need to sit down before you fall down," he said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle for someone so large. Violet looked up and up, past the broad chest covered in buckskin, past the thick shoulders, to a face weathered by sun and wind and framed by dark hair that brushed his collar. His eyes were the color of the sky before a storm, gray, blue, and steady, and they were looking at her feet with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm fine," she said, but the words came out thin and unconvincing. "You're leaving tracks." He nodded at the ground behind her, and she saw what he meant. Every other step left a faint red mark on the wooden planks of the sidewalk. She swayed then, the world tilting sideways, and those large hands caught her before she hit the ground. He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, and she was too tired to protest as he carried her into the shade of the store's awning and set her carefully on a bench. "Stay here," he commanded, and disappeared inside. Violet sat because her legs had stopped obeying her anyway. She looked at her feet, at the cuts and blisters and calluses that had accumulated over 21 years of walking barefoot. Her father had never had money for shoes, not even when times were good. Shoes were a luxury, he said, and luxuries were for other people. The big man returned with a dipper of water and made her drink it slowly. Then he crouched in front of her, and she realized with a start that even crouching he was nearly at her eye level. "I'm Benjamin Bridger," he said. "People call me Bridge. I live up in the mountains, but I come to town for supplies sometimes. And you are Violet Sawyer." The name felt strange in her mouth now that her father was gone. She was the last Sawyer, which meant she was nobody at all. "Well, Miss Sawyer, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'd appreciate honest answers. When did you last eat?" She had to think about that. "Yesterday morning, some berries I found." "Where are you headed?" "I don't know." "Where did you come from?" "Copper Creek." "The mining camp about 40 miles south." Benjamin's eyes narrowed slightly. "That camp shut down 2 weeks ago when the vein ran out. Everyone cleared out." "Not everyone." Violet's throat tightened. "My father stayed. He said he could find more copper if he just kept digging. But the tunnel collapsed and I couldn't get him out in time. I tried for a whole day, but the rocks were too heavy." Something shifted in Benjamin's expression, a softness that made her eyes sting with tears she refused to shed. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "He's buried there now. I didn't have a shovel, but I covered him with stones and said some words from the Bible I remembered. Then I started walking. To Sheridan. To anywhere that wasn't there." Benjamin nodded slowly as if this made perfect sense to him. Then he looked at her feet again. "Those need cleaning and bandaging. But more than that, they need protecting. You can't keep walking on bare feet, not on these roads. You'll get infection, maybe lose a toe or worse." "I know," Violet said tiredly, "but shoes cost money and I don't have any. The general store sells ready-made shoes, but they never fit right. They're all the same size, more or less, and they rub blisters even on people who are used to wearing them." He was quiet for a moment, studying her feet with the focus of a man examining a problem he intended to solve. "I could make you a pair, properly fitted, soft leather that'll mold to your feet. Would take me a few days, but they'd last you years if you care for them right." Violet stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because you need shoes, and I know how to make them. I can't pay you." "Didn't ask you to." She shook her head, confused and wary. In her experience, men didn't help for no reason. "I don't understand." Benjamin stood, his full height impressive in the afternoon sun. "It's not complicated, Miss Sawyer. I see someone in need, I have the skill to help, so I help. That's all there is to it." He paused, then added, "But if you want to think of it as a trade, you could help me with something while I work on the shoes. I'm not good with words, and I've been meaning to write some letters that I keep putting off. If you can read and write, you could help me with that." "I can read and write. My mother taught me before she died." Violet looked at his face, searching for the trick or the trap, but found only patient sincerity. "You really mean it? You'll make me shoes?" "I really mean it. But first, let's get those feet cleaned up and bandaged. There's a doctor in town, old fellow named Morrison. He'll have what we need." "I told you I don't have money for a doctor. And I told you I'm helping. That includes the doctor." Benjamin's tone was firm but not unkind. "Can you walk, or should I carry you again?" Violet tried to stand and immediately sat back down, her vision swimming. "I think I need to be carried." He lifted her again, cradling her against his chest as he walked down the main street of Sheridan. Violet was aware of people staring, of whispered conversation starting in their wake, but Benjamin paid no attention to any of it. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who didn't care what others thought. Dr. Morrison was indeed old, with white hair and gentle hands that probed her feet carefully. "You've done a number on these," he said. "How far did you walk?" 40 miles, she said. Benjamin answered when Violet stayed silent. The doctor whistled low. 40 miles barefoot in August. You're lucky you still have feet, young lady. Could have been much worse." He cleaned the cuts with something that burned, applied salve that soothed, and wrapped both feet in clean white bandages. "Keep off them as much as you can for the next few days. Change the bandages daily, keep everything clean. Come back if you see any redness or swelling or if they start to smell bad." "How much do I owe you?" Benjamin asked, reaching for a leather pouch at his belt. $2 should cover it." Benjamin paid without hesitation, then turned to Violet. "Can you ride a horse?" "I've never tried." "Then you'll ride with me. My cabin's about an hour north, up in the mountains. You'll stay there while you heal and while I make your shoes. It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe, and I've got food enough for two." Every instinct Violet had developed for survival was screaming at her to refuse, to not go alone into the mountains with a strange man, no matter how kind he seemed. But those same instincts had no alternative to offer. She had no money, no family, no prospects, and feet too damaged to walk on. Sometimes the only choice was to trust or to give up entirely. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you." Benjamin's cabin turned out to be much more than the rough shelter Violet had imagined. It was a solid structure built from thick logs, with real glass windows and a stone fireplace and a wooden floor that was clean swept. There were furs on the walls and a bearskin rug in front of the hearth. Shelves held books and tools and supplies, all organized with a precision that surprised her. This was the home of a man who valued order and craftsmanship. "There's only one bedroom," Benjamin said, setting her carefully on a chair near the fireplace. "You'll take the bed, I'll sleep out here." "I can't take your bed." "You can and you will." "I've slept in worse places than a floor with a bearskin rug." His tone suggested the discussion was over. "Are you hungry?" She was starving, but pride made her hesitate. "A little." "I'll make something substantial. You need to eat properly if you're going to heal." He moved to the fireplace and began pulling out ingredients, his movements efficient and practiced. Soon the smell of frying bacon and baking bread filled the cabin. Violet watched him work, this strange mountain man who had literally carried her into his life. He was enormous, well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed built for hauling trees and arms thick with muscle. His hands were large and scarred from work, but they moved with surprising delicacy as he sliced vegetables and stirred the pot hanging over the fire. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and long enough to tie back with a leather cord, though some strands had escaped to frame his face. He had a beard neatly trimmed, and those unusual gray-blue eyes that seemed to see more than most people. "How old are you?" she asked abruptly. He glanced at her, amused. 26, and you?" 21, as of 2 months ago. "Happy belated birthday, then." He ladled stew into a bowl and brought it to her with a thick slice of bread. "Eat slowly. Your stomach needs to remember how this works." The food was simple but delicious, seasoned with herbs she didn't recognize. Violet ate carefully, savoring every bite, trying not to think about how long it had been since someone had cooked for her. Benjamin ate his own meal standing by the fireplace, watching her with the vigilant attention of a man ensuring a task was completed properly. "Why do you live up here alone?" she asked between bites. "I like the quiet, like the space. Down in town, people are always talking, always wanting something, always in your business. Up here it's just me and the mountains and the animals. That suits me fine. Don't you get lonely?" Benjamin considered this. "Sometimes. But lonely is better than uncomfortable, and I'm uncomfortable around most people. They talk too much and listen too little. You're talking to me. You're different. You ask real questions and wait for real answers. Most people just fill the air with noise." He refilled her bowl without asking if she wanted more. "Besides, you need help and I'm helping. That's simple. I understand simple." After she ate, he showed her the bedroom. It was small but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts and more furs. A washstand stood in the corner with a pitcher and basin. The single window looked out over a valley that stretched toward distant mountains, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. "Rest," Benjamin said. "I'll wake you for supper." Violet didn't remember lying down, but when she opened her eyes again, the light had changed to the deep gold of evening. She could hear Benjamin moving around in the main room, and the smell of cooking food made her stomach rumble despite the stew she had eaten earlier. She examined her feet in the fading light. The bandages were still clean and white, no blood seeping through. They hurt less than they had, or maybe she was just getting used to the pain. She thought about Benjamin's promise to make her shoes, about the careful way he had studied her feet as if they were a puzzle to be solved. Nobody had ever made anything for her before. The idea was both wonderful and terrifying. When she emerged from the bedroom, moving slowly on her tender feet, Benjamin was setting the table. He had made venison steaks with roasted potatoes and greens, and there was more of the fresh bread. "You didn't have to make so much," Violet said. "You need to build your strength back up. That means eating proper meals." He pulled out a chair for her, an oddly courtly gesture from such a rough-looking man. "How do your feet feel?" "Better." The bandages helped. They ate in companionable silence for a while. Then Benjamin said, "Tomorrow, if you're up to it, I'll measure your feet and start working on the shoes. I've got deer hide that's been tanned and softened, should work well. But I need to get the measurements right, otherwise they won't fit proper." "How did you learn to make shoes?" "My father was a cobbler back in Pennsylvania. He wanted me to take over his shop, learn the trade proper. But I didn't want to spend my life in a town, making shoes for people who complained about the price and the fit and everything else. So I came west when I was 18, spent some years trapping and hunting, ended up here. But the skills stayed with me. I make my own boots, repair them when they wear. Sometimes I make things for other people if they ask and if I like them well enough." "And you like me well enough?" Violet asked, slightly teasing. Benjamin looked at her directly, his gray-blue eyes serious. "I think you've had a hard time and you're trying to be brave about it. I think you deserve some kindness. and I think making you shoes is the least I can do." The simple honesty of it made Violet's throat tight. She looked down at her plate. "My father used to say kindness was weakness. He said people who were kind got taken advantage of and ended up with nothing. Your father was wrong." Benjamin's voice was gentle but firm. "Kindness is strength. It takes more courage to help someone than to walk past them. Any fool can be hard and bitter. Being decent takes real effort." Violet thought about this, about her father's anger and bitterness, about how he had died alone in a collapsed mine tunnel chasing copper that probably wasn't even there. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. The next morning, Benjamin woke her with coffee and fried eggs and hash browns crispy at the edges. The sun was streaming through the window, and birds were singing in the pines outside. Violet realized with a start that she had slept through the entire night without waking once, something that hadn't happened since before her father died. After breakfast, Benjamin carefully unwrapped the bandages on her feet, examined the healing cuts, applied fresh salve, and wrapped them again in clean cloth. Then he brought out a piece of paper and a measuring tape made of cloth marked with numbers. "This might tickle a bit," he warned, and proceeded to measure her feet with focused concentration. Length from heel to longest toe, width at the widest point, the curve of her arch, the circumference of her ankle. He wrote everything down in precise numbers, occasionally going back to remeasure to make sure he had it right. His hands were warm and careful, touching her damaged feet with a gentleness that made something in Violet's chest ache. Nobody had ever touched her with such care, as if she were something valuable that might break. "Your feet are small," he observed, "but well-shaped. Good arches. Once they heal and you start wearing shoes regular, you'll have less trouble than most people. The key is getting the fit exactly right on the first pair so they don't cause new problems." "How long will it take to make them?" 3 days, maybe 4. I need to cut the leather, soak it, mold it to the measurements, stitch it together, and then let it dry proper. Can't rush good work." "I could help with something. I feel useless just sitting here." Benjamin smiled, the expression transforming his face from severe to almost boyish. "I told you, you can help me with those letters I need to write, and if you want, you can read to me while I work. I've got books, but I don't often take the time to read them. If you read aloud, I can work and listen at the same time." So that became their pattern. Benjamin would work on the shoes, cutting and soaking leather, stitching with thick thread and careful precision, while Violet sat nearby and read to him from his small collection of books. He had poetry and philosophy and adventure stories, all well worn from previous readings. Violet discovered that he favored Whitman and Emerson, that he liked stories about exploration and discovery, that he had no patience for anything too flowery or pretentious. "Read like you're talking," he instructed. "Not like you're performing. I want to hear the words, not a show." Violet adjusted her approach and found that she enjoyed it, enjoyed the rhythm of the words and the way Benjamin would sometimes pause in his work to listen to a particularly good passage. She enjoyed watching him too, the way his strong hands moved with such precision, the way he would frown in concentration when a stitch needed to be exactly right, the way he would test the leather's flexibility before deciding it was ready for the next step. On the second day, while she read from a collection of Thoreau's essays, Benjamin said suddenly, "Tell me about your mother." Violet looked up, startled. "What made you think of her? You mentioned she taught you to read and write. That means she valued education." "Not everyone did, especially for daughters. She was a teacher back in Ohio before she married my father. She could read Latin and Greek, knew poetry by heart, played the piano. My father courted her with promises of adventure out west, of making their fortune in the goldfields. Instead, she got a succession of mining camps and poverty and disappointment. Violet's voice went quiet. She died when I was 12. Fever. We couldn't afford a real doctor. Do you look like her? People said I did. Dark hair, green eyes, small build. She used to say I had her hands, good for detail work. Benjamin nodded, his eyes on the leather he was shaping. She sounds like she was too good for the life she got. She was, but she never complained, never blamed my father even though it was his fault. She just tried to make the best of things and make sure I had some education so I wouldn't be completely helpless. You're not helpless. You walked 40 miles on bare feet and survived. That's not helpless. The simple confidence in his statement made Violet feel stronger somehow. She went back to reading, but she was aware of a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. That evening, after supper, Benjamin brought out paper and pen and ink. "Time for those letters," he said. "If you're willing." "Of course. Who are you writing to?" "My mother in Pennsylvania. She worries about me being out here alone, and I'm bad about keeping in touch. I need to let her know I'm alive and doing fine." Violet prepared the pen and paper. "Just tell me what you want to say." Benjamin paced while he talked, and Violet wrote down his words, occasionally suggesting a better phrase or fixing his grammar. He told his mother about the cabin, about the hunting and trapping, about the peace of the mountains. He asked after his sisters and their families. He assured her he was eating well and staying healthy. "Anything else?" Violet asked when he fell silent. Benjamin hesitated, then said, "Tell her I met someone. A young woman who needed help. Tell her I'm making shoes for her and that I think she would like her." Violet's hand shook slightly as she wrote the words. "Should I mention my name?" "Yes. Tell her your name is Violet Sawyer and that you read Thoreau like you're having a conversation with him, and that you have green eyes that remind me of pine trees in summer." Violet looked up, her heart beating faster. "Benjamin, too much. Sorry, I'm not good with words." "No, it's not too much. It's lovely. I just didn't expect it." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between them, something that had been building since he first caught her when she swayed outside the general store. Benjamin cleared his throat and looked away. "Anyway, sign it from me and seal it up. I'll post it next time I go to town." Violet finished the letter with slightly unsteady hands, folded it, and sealed it with wax from the candle. When she looked up, Benjamin was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, but that made her skin feel warm. On the third day, the shoes began to take real shape. Benjamin had crafted them with incredible care. Soft leather uppers that would lace up the front, sturdy soles reinforced with extra layers, padded insoles that would cushion her healing feet. He had even added decorative stitching along the seams, a touch of beauty in an otherwise practical creation. "Try this," he said, holding up one nearly finished shoe. "Just to test the fit before I finish the second one." Violet carefully unwrapped her bandages. Her feet had healed remarkably well in the 3 days of rest and proper care. The cuts closed and the swelling reduced. Benjamin helped her slide her foot into the shoe, his hand steadying her ankle. The leather was incredibly soft against her skin, and the fit was perfect. Not tight, not loose, but snug in all the right places. When she stood and put her weight on it, the padded insole cushioned her foot exactly where it needed cushioning. "How does it feel?" Benjamin asked, watching her intently. "It feels wonderful. Like it was made just for me." "It was made just for you. That's the point." He smiled, clearly pleased. "Sit back down. I'll finish the second one today, and tomorrow you can try them both together." Violet sat, but she kept looking at the shoe on her foot, marveling at it. "I can't believe you made this. It's beautiful." "It's functional. The beauty is just a side effect of doing the work right." My father used to say that anything worth doing was worth doing well, but he never actually followed his own advice. You do. Benjamin shrugged, already working on the second shoe. Don't see the point of doing things halfway. If I'm going to spend time on something, might as well make it the best I can make it. They were quiet for a while, Violet reading and Benjamin working. Then Violet said, "What happens after the shoes are done?" Benjamin's hand stilled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you said I could stay while the shoes were being made and while I healed. But my feet are nearly healed and the shoes are almost finished. So what happens next? Do I go back to Sheridan?" "Do you want to go back to Sheridan?" "I don't know. I don't have anywhere else to go, but I don't really have anything in Sheridan either. No job, no money, no prospects." Benjamin set down his tools and looked at her directly. "You could stay here." Violet's heart jumped. "Stay here with you? It's a big cabin, plenty of room. And I could use the company, turns out. I didn't realize how quiet it was until I had someone to talk to again." He paused, then added carefully, "I'm not suggesting anything improper. You'd have the bedroom, same as now. I'd sleep out here. We could just be companions, help each other out. You could keep reading to me and helping with letters and such. I could teach you hunting and tracking, how to live off the land, how to be independent so you never have to rely on someone who might let you down. People would talk. A woman living alone with a man in the mountains. Let them talk. We're up here, they're down there. What they think doesn't change what's true." Violet studied his face, this kind, strong, solitary man who had appeared in her life when she needed help most desperately. "What is true?" "True is that I like having you here. True is that I think you need a safe place to figure out what you want to do with your life. True is that I'm not going to push you into anything, but I'm also not going to turn you out with nowhere to go just because your shoes are finished." Benjamin's expression was open, honest. "Stay as long as you want. Leave whenever you're ready. No obligations, no expectations. That's very generous." "It's not generous, it's selfish. I don't want you to leave." The raw honesty of it took Violet's breath away. "I don't want to leave either," she admitted. "Then it's settled. You'll stay." "For now," Violet said, needing to maintain some sense of independence of choice. "For now," Benjamin agreed, and went back to work on the second shoe with what might have been a smile tugging at his beard. The next morning, Violet put on both shoes for the first time. Benjamin laced them carefully, making sure they were snug but not tight, and then helped her stand. She took a few experimental steps across the cabin floor, marveling at the strange sensation of having her feet enclosed and protected. "They feel odd," she admitted, "but good, like armor. You'll get used to them. Walk around for a bit each day, gradually increasing the time. Your feet need to adapt to being in shoes, same as they once adapted to being bare." Violet walked back and forth across the cabin, getting used to the weight and structure of the shoes. Benjamin watched with the satisfaction of a craftsman seeing his work succeed. "Thank you," Violet said, stopping in front of him. "I don't just mean for the shoes, I mean for everything. For helping me when you didn't have to, for taking me in, for treating me with kindness and respect, for making me feel like I matter." Benjamin reached out and gently tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against her cheek. "You do matter, Violet. Don't ever think you don't." For a long moment they stood close together, his hand still near her face, her heart beating fast in her chest. Then Benjamin stepped back, clearing his throat. "Let's have breakfast. Then, if you're feeling up to it, I'll show you around the property. There's a stream where I catch fish, a garden where I grow vegetables, some good hunting trails. You should know the area if you're going to be living here." The tour of Benjamin's mountain property took most of the morning. He showed her the cold stream where he kept a fishing line, the vegetable garden carefully fenced against deer and rabbits. the smokehouse where he preserved meat, the woodshed stocked for winter. He pointed out edible plants and poisonous ones, showed her tracks left by deer and elk and bears, taught her how to read the signs of the forest. Violet absorbed it all eagerly, asking questions and testing her new shoes on the mountain terrain. They held up beautifully, protecting her feet while still allowing her to feel the ground beneath her. By the time they returned to the cabin for lunch, she was tired but exhilarated. "You're a good student," Benjamin observed over bread and cheese and cold venison. "You pay attention and you remember details. My mother used to say I had a mind like a steel trap. My father said it was wasted on a girl. Your father was wrong about a lot of things." Benjamin's tone was flat, brooking no argument. Intelligence is valuable no matter who has it. Over the following weeks, Violet settled into life in the mountain cabin. She learned to cook over the fireplace, to preserve food for winter, to mend clothes and blankets. Benjamin taught her to shoot his rifle, patiently correcting her stance and aim until she could hit a target more often than not. He showed her how to set snares for rabbits and how to gut and skin them, though she turned pale the first few times and he had to finish for her. "You'll get used to it," he said. "Out here, if you can't kill and clean your own food, you go hungry. I know, I'm trying. You're doing fine, better than fine," he smiled at her. "You've got steady hands and a strong stomach, that counts for a lot." They fell into easy routines. Benjamin would hunt or work on various projects while Violet tended the garden and prepared meals. In the evenings, she would read aloud while he worked on some craft or another, always making something useful with his skilled hands. Sometimes they would just sit by the fire and talk, long conversations about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and histories. Violet learned that Benjamin had two sisters, both married with children, both living back in Pennsylvania. She learned that he had tried city life and hated it, that he had worked briefly as a hired gun before deciding violence for pay wasn't for him, that he had been alone in these mountains for 4 years before she arrived. She learned that he woke early and worked late, that he had nightmares sometimes, though he never said about what, that he sang to himself while he worked when he thought no one could hear. Benjamin learned that Violet had always wanted to be a teacher like her mother, that she was afraid of thunder because their tent had been struck by lightning once, that she had never tasted chocolate or seen the ocean or been to a real theater. He learned that she was stubborn and proud, that she pushed herself too hard and rested too little, that she cried silently in her room sometimes when she thought he was asleep. One night in late September, as the air began to turn crisp with approaching autumn, they sat outside watching the stars. Violet had wrapped herself in one of Benjamin's heavy coats against the chill, and he sat close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Do you ever regret coming west?" she asked. "No. Out here I can breathe. Back east, everything felt too small, too crowded, too full of rules that didn't make sense. Out here the rules are simple. Work hard, respect the land, take care of yourself and the people who matter to you." "Am I one of the people who matter to you?" Benjamin turned to look at her, his expression serious in the starlight. "Yes, you matter a great deal to me, Violet," her heart fluttered. "You matter to me too. Good." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I need to tell you something and I'm going to be bad at it because I'm bad at this kind of thing. But you deserve honesty, so I'm going to try." Violet waited, hardly breathing. "When I first saw you in Sheridan, all I thought was that you needed help and I could provide it. That was all. But these past weeks, having you here, talking with you, teaching you things and learning from you, I've started to feel something more. Something I haven't felt before and don't quite know what to do with." He looked down at his hands. I think I'm falling in love with you, maybe have already fallen, I'm not sure, I don't have experience with this. Violet's breath caught. Benjamin, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for anything. You're safe here regardless of how you feel about me. I just thought you should know, because keeping it secret felt like lying, and I won't lie to you. Can I tell you something? Violet asked softly. Of course. I think I've been falling in love with you too. Since you measured my feet with those gentle hands and looked at me like I was worth taking care of. Since you carried me without making me feel weak. Since you made me shoes because I needed them and taught me things because I wanted to learn. Since you made space for me in your life without demanding anything in return. She reached out and took his hand, marveling at how small hers looked in his. I don't have experience with this either, but I know how I feel when I see you smile. I know how safe I feel sleeping under your roof. I know I don't want to be anywhere else but here with you. Benjamin's fingers closed gently around hers. Are you sure? I'm not easy to live with. I get absorbed in my work and forget to talk. I have dark moods sometimes. I'm better with leather and wood than I am with people. I'm not easy either. I'm stubborn and I have nightmares and I don't trust easily. But I trust you, Benjamin. I love you. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, the gesture both old-fashioned and intimate. I love you too, Violet. I'm going to do my best to be worthy of that. You already are. They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the stars wheel overhead. Then Benjamin said, we should probably talk about what this means, about the future. What do you want it to mean? I want you to stay, not as a guest or a companion, but as my wife. I want to marry you proper, in front of a preacher if we can find one, or just by declaration if we can't. I want to build you furniture and teach you everything I know and grow old with you in this cabin, but only if that's what you want too. Violet's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. Yes, that's what I want, all of it. Benjamin pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she leaned into his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her cheek. He was so warm, so solid, so real. After a lifetime of instability and loss, she had found someone who made her feel anchored. When? She asked. Soon as possible. We can ride to Sheridan tomorrow, find the preacher, make it legal. Unless you want a fancy wedding with a dress and guests and all that. Violet laughed softly. I've never been fancy. Tomorrow sounds perfect. They rode to Sheridan the next morning, Violet sitting in front of Benjamin on his large roan horse, her new shoes secure in the stirrups he had adjusted for her shorter legs. The journey that had taken her days to walk passed in just over an hour on horseback. The preacher was a thin, elderly man named Reverend Hutchins, who operated out of a small white church on the edge of town. He looked at them with mild surprise when they explained what they wanted. Marriage is a serious commitment, he said. Are you certain you've known each other long enough to make this decision? We're certain, Benjamin said firmly. Reverend Hutchins looked at Violet. And you, young lady, you're entering this of your own free will. Completely free will, Violet confirmed. Benjamin is the best man I've ever known. I want to marry him. The Reverend studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, but I'll need witnesses. Let me fetch my wife and the shopkeeper from across the street. The ceremony was simple, conducted in the small church with afternoon sun streaming through plain glass windows. Violet wore her only dress, a faded calico that Benjamin had washed and mended for her weeks ago. Benjamin wore clean buckskins and had trimmed his beard and tied his hair back neatly. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices, and when Reverend Hutchins pronounced them husband and wife, Benjamin kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. You're mine now, he murmured against her lips, and I'm yours. That's how this works. That's how this works, Violet agreed, smiling through happy tears. They spent their wedding night at a small hotel in Sheridan, a rare luxury that Benjamin insisted on. He was gentle and patient with Violet, mindful of her inexperience, taking his time to make sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, she lay in his arms, tracing the scars on his chest and shoulders. "Where did you get all these?" she asked. "Different places. That one's from a bear that didn't appreciate me checking his territory. That one's from a knife fight in a saloon back when I was young and stupid. That one's from falling off a horse onto a sharp rock. You've lived quite a life. I've survived quite a life. There's a difference." He kissed the top of her head. "But now I'm going to live properly with you." They returned to the mountain cabin the next day, and Violet felt a deep sense of coming home as it came into view through the trees. This was her home now, truly and legally. This was where she belonged. Benjamin carried her over the threshold, another old-fashioned gesture that made her laugh. "We're already married," she pointed out. "You don't have to do all the traditional things. I want to do them. You deserve all the traditional things, even if we're doing them in a non-traditional order." That winter was the happiest time Violet had ever known. Snow fell thick and white, blanketing the mountains in silence, and they spent long, cozy evenings by the fire while the wind howled outside. Benjamin taught her to play chess using pieces he carved from wood, and she taught him to appreciate poetry beyond just Whitman and Emerson. They read together, cooked together, worked together on various projects to pass the time. Benjamin started building furniture, beautiful pieces made from pine and oak and maple. He built Violet a rocking chair with her initials carved into the back, a writing desk with compartments for paper and ink, a bookshelf to hold their growing collection of volumes. His hands were never idle, always creating something useful and beautiful. Violet discovered she had a talent for sewing and began making clothes for both of them, practical garments suited to mountain life, but with little touches of beauty in the stitching and details. She made curtains for the windows, quilts for the bed, tablecloths embroidered with simple patterns. In January, as the snow piled high outside, Violet realized she was pregnant. She told Benjamin one evening after supper, nervous about his reaction. His face lit up with a joy so pure it took her breath away. "A baby, we're having a baby. Yes, sometime in the summer, I think. August, maybe." Benjamin picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down gently, concerned. "Sorry, should I not do that? I don't want to hurt you or the baby." Violet laughed. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass, but maybe less spinning in the future." He knelt in front of her and placed his large hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I'm your father, and I'm going to do everything I can to give you a good life. You're already loved, you know, more than you can possibly imagine." Tears filled Violet's eyes. "You're going to be a wonderful father." "I'm going to try. That's all I can promise. I'll try my best." Benjamin became even more protective during Violet's pregnancy, constantly ensuring she had enough to eat, that she wasn't working too hard, that she was comfortable. He built a beautiful wooden cradle with carved animals dancing around the sides, a rocking chair specifically designed for nursing, a chest for baby clothes and blankets. Violet made tiny garments from soft fabric, knitted booties and caps, prepared everything they might need. She craved strange combinations of food, and Benjamin would hunt or gather whatever she wanted without complaint. She wanted venison with wild berries. He'd provide it. Fish with honey. He'd catch and prepare it, even though he thought it sounded terrible. In late May, a young woman from Sheridan arrived at their cabin, out of breath from the steep climb. Her name was Margaret Ellis, and she was the doctor's daughter, newly returned from nursing school in Chicago. "Father sent me," she explained. "He said there was a woman up here who would be giving birth in a few months, and you'd need someone who knows what they're doing. I'm trained as a midwife, and I'd like to help if you'll have me." Violet and Benjamin looked at each other. "How did your father know?" Violet asked. Margaret smiled. "Reverend Hutchins mentioned it. He sees most couples who marry, and he does the math. When you didn't come back to town for winter supplies, Father figured you were well-stocked and self-sufficient, but that come summer you might need medical help. So he sent me." "We'd be grateful for your help," Benjamin said. "Can you ride back up here when the time comes?" "I can. Just send word to town when her pains start, and I'll come as quickly as I can." As Margaret's predicted summer approached, Benjamin grew increasingly anxious. He checked and rechecked their supplies, made sure they had extra clean cloths and fresh water, kept the cabin cleaner than it had ever been. Violet found his nervousness endearing even as it sometimes drove her to distraction. "The baby will come when the baby comes," she told him. "You can't control it by worrying." "I know, but I can prepare. Preparing helps." On a hot August afternoon, exactly 1 year and 1 week after Benjamin had first measured Violet's feet and promised to make her shoes, the pains began. Benjamin rode to Sheridan at breakneck speed and returned with Margaret Ellis, who took charge of the situation with calm efficiency. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Benjamin paced outside the bedroom door, occasionally coming in to hold Violet's hand and let her squeeze hard enough to hurt. Margaret was patient and encouraging, guiding Violet through each contraction. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith on the second day, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Benjamin rushed in to find Violet exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. "It's a boy," Margaret announced. "Healthy and loud and absolutely perfect." Benjamin approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was red-faced from crying, but to Benjamin he was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Can I hold him?" he asked softly. Violet passed the baby to his father, and Benjamin cradled the tiny body with infinite care, his large hands making the infant look even smaller. "Hello, son," he whispered. "I'm your father. I've been waiting to meet you." The baby stopped crying and seemed to focus on Benjamin's face, and something in Benjamin's expression cracked open, revealing a vulnerability and love so deep it brought tears to Violet's eyes. "What should we name him?" Benjamin asked, not looking away from his son. Violet had been thinking about this. "I'd like to name him after both our fathers, even though mine wasn't perfect. Thomas was my father's name and yours was William. What about William Thomas Bridger? That's good. That's real good." Benjamin looked at her, his eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you, Violet, for him, for everything, for giving me a family when I thought I'd always be alone." "You saved me first," Violet reminded him. "You made me shoes and gave me a home and showed me what love should be. This is just us building our life together." Margaret stayed for 3 days, making sure both mother and baby were healthy and teaching them the basics of newborn care. Benjamin was an attentive student, learning to change nappies and swaddle and soothe the baby when he cried. He was awkward at first, terrified of breaking something so small, but he learned quickly. After Margaret left, promising to check on them in a month, Benjamin and Violet settled into the exhausting rhythm of new parenthood. They took turns walking the floor with William when he cried at night, took turns napping during the day when the baby slept. Benjamin built a sling so Violet could carry William against her chest while she worked, keeping him close and content. As summer turned to autumn, William grew and changed, his dark hair becoming thick and curly, his eyes settling into the same gray-blue as his father's. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, fascinated by everything around him. Benjamin made him toys, carved animals and rattles, and a mobile to hang over the cradle. One cool October evening, with William asleep in his cradle and a fire crackling in the hearth, Violet and Benjamin sat together in the rocking chairs he had built, watching their son sleep. "Do you remember a year ago," Violet asked softly, "when we sat outside and told each other we were falling in love? I remember. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. I was so scared that night. Scared of feeling too much, scared you'd change your mind, scared I'd wake up and find out it was all a dream." Benjamin reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. "Not a dream. Real. All of this is real. The realest thing I've ever known." Violet smiled at him. "Do you ever miss being alone in the mountains?" "No." "Well, maybe sometimes I miss the quiet when William's been screaming for an hour. But I don't miss being lonely, and there's a difference between quiet and lonely. I thought I was content with my solitude, but I was just hiding. From people, from connection, from the risk of caring about someone. You changed that. You changed everything. You changed everything for me too. I was walking with bloody feet and no hope, and you gave me shoes and a home and a family. You gave me a reason to believe good things could still happen." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, listening to their son's gentle breathing and the wind in the pines outside. This was happiness, Violet thought. Not excitement or passion or grand gestures, though they had shared those too. This quiet contentment, this feeling of being exactly where she belonged with exactly the right person, this was what happiness really meant. The years passed in a steady rhythm of seasons and growth. William grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's strength and his mother's curiosity, always exploring, always asking questions. Benjamin taught him to whittle and track animals and respect the forest. Violet taught him letters and numbers and the poetry she loved. When William was 3, Violet became pregnant again, and this time the birth was easier. They had another son whom they named Daniel, after Violet's mother's father. Daniel was quieter than William had been, more contemplative, with green eyes like his mother and a gentle disposition that reminded Benjamin of Violet herself. The cabin expanded as the family grew. Benjamin built an addition with 2 small bedrooms for the boys, a larger main room, a proper kitchen area. He built furniture and shelves and storage, always improving, always creating. The family became mostly self-sufficient, growing their own vegetables, hunting their own meat, making their own clothes and tools. They visited Sheridan twice a year for supplies they couldn't make themselves, and to maintain connections with the few people they considered friends. Dr. Morrison retired, and his daughter Margaret took over his practice. Reverend Hutchins passed away and was replaced by a younger minister who had less patience for unconventional families living in the mountains, but Benjamin and Violet didn't particularly care what he thought. When William was 7 and Daniel was 4, Violet became pregnant a 3rd time. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, with sickness that lasted months and fatigue that made simple tasks exhausting. Benjamin took over most of her work, managing the household and the children while still maintaining the property. "You don't have to do all this," Violet protested weakly from the bed where she spent most of her time. "Yes, I do. You carried our sons and now you're carrying another child. The least I can do is carry the work for a while." Benjamin brought her tea and dry bread, the only thing she could keep down. "Besides, the boys are helping. William's getting good with the vegetables and Daniel likes feeding the chickens." In November, on a night when early snow was falling soft and silent, Violet gave birth to a daughter. The labor was intense but mercifully quick, and when Margaret Ellis placed the tiny girl in Violet's arms, both parents wept. "She's perfect," Benjamin whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger. Absolutely perfect. They named her Grace Isabel, Grace for the concept and Isabel after Benjamin's mother. She had wisps of blonde hair, unusual in their dark-haired family, and eyes that would eventually settle into hazel. From the beginning, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Benjamin, who had been protective of his sons, became almost comically protective of his daughter. He built her an elaborate cradle with carved roses, sewed her tiny dresses with painstaking care, sang her lullabies in his rough voice. When she cried, he would pace the floor for hours, soothing her with a patience that amazed Violet. "You're spoiling her," Violet said, amused, watching Benjamin rock Grace long after she had fallen asleep. "She's my daughter. I'm allowed to spoil her. Your sons are going to be jealous." "My sons are fine. Look at them." William and Daniel were asleep in their bedroom, tangled together like puppies. They adored their baby sister, fighting over who got to hold her and help with her care. The cabin was full of noise and life and love. Everything Benjamin had never imagined having, and everything he now couldn't imagine living without. When Grace was 2 years old, a man arrived at their cabin one spring afternoon. He was well dressed in a way that suggested money, riding a good horse and leading a pack mule. Benjamin answered the door with his rifle in hand, instinctively protective. "Can I help you?" he asked, not exactly friendly. The man smiled politely. "I'm looking for Benjamin Bridger. I was told he lived up here. You found him. What do you want?" "My name is Edward Thornton. I own a general store in Cheyenne, and I've been hearing about your work. People say you make the finest leather goods in Wyoming territory. Boots, shoes, belts, saddlebags, all of it. I'd like to offer you a business arrangement." Benjamin's eyes narrowed. "I'm not interested in mass production or moving to a city. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking if you'd be willing to make custom pieces that I could sell in my store. You set the price, you work at your own pace, you maintain your quality standards. I simply act as a middleman, connecting you with customers who want the best and are willing to pay for it." "Why would I want that? I've got everything I need here." "Perhaps you do now. But your children are growing. They'll need education, opportunities, maybe even medical care beyond what the local doctor can provide. Money gives you options. I'm offering you a way to earn good money doing work you already do without giving up your independence." Benjamin looked back into the cabin, where Violet was teaching William to read from one of their precious books while Daniel played with Grace. They were happy here, safe here, but Thornton had a point. The world was changing, and his children would need to navigate it eventually. "Let me talk to my wife," he said. Violet listened to Thornton's proposal with interest. "It's not a bad idea," she said. "You already make things for people occasionally. This would just formalize it and bring in steady income. We could save money for the children's education, for emergencies, for the future. You think I should do it? I think you should consider it carefully. We're doing well now, but nothing stays the same forever. Having financial security would give us more choices." Benjamin thought about it for 3 days, turning the idea over in his mind, weighing the advantages against the potential complications. Finally, he agreed to Thornton's proposal on a trial basis. He would make a few pieces, send them to Cheyenne, see how it went. The arrangement proved successful beyond anyone's expectations. Benjamin's work was exceptional, and customers in Cheyenne and beyond were willing to pay premium prices for boots and belts and bags made by the legendary mountain craftsman. Benjamin limited himself to a few custom orders per month, maintaining his standards and his lifestyle while bringing in steady income. The money was carefully saved, most of it tucked away for the children's future. But some of it went to improvements and small luxuries. a better stove for the cabin, more books for their growing library, a real china tea set for Violet, who had always served tea in tin cups, glass windows that actually closed properly, small things that made their lives easier and more comfortable. William grew into a serious, studious boy who loved books and learning as much as his mother did. At 10 years old, he announced that he wanted to be a lawyer when he grew up, which surprised Benjamin. A lawyer? Why a lawyer? Because laws are important, and someone needs to make sure they're fair and applied correctly. I want to help people who can't help themselves. Benjamin looked at Violet, who shrugged with a smile. He gets that from you, she said. The helping people part. Daniel, in contrast, was pure mountain child. He loved hunting and tracking and being outdoors, learning everything Benjamin could teach him about living off the land. At 8 years old, he could read animal signs better than most adults, could shoot straight, could gut and clean a fish with efficient precision. Grace, at 4 years old, was a strange combination of both her brothers and neither. She loved pretty things but also loved climbing trees. She wanted to learn to read, but also wanted to learn to shoot. She was stubborn and sweet in equal measure, constantly challenging her parents and siblings in ways that were both exasperating and delightful. One evening, after the children were asleep, Benjamin and Violet sat outside watching the stars, just as they had done on so many nights over the years. "Are you happy?" Benjamin asked quietly. Violet looked at him, surprised. "Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask?" "Because this isn't the life most women would choose. Isolated in the mountains, working hard, no fancy things or society or any of that. Sometimes I worry that you gave up too much to be with me." "Benjamin Bridger, you look at me." Violet waited until he met her eyes. "I didn't give up anything. I chose this. I chose you. And every single day since, I've been grateful for that choice. This life, this family, you're everything I never knew I needed and everything I'll always want. Do you understand?" "I understand." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I love you, Violet. More than I could ever express with words. I love you too. And I'm going to keep loving you for the rest of my life, so you better get used to it." They laughed together, easy and comfortable after years of partnership. This was what they had built together, starting from the moment he measured her bare feet and promised to make her shoes. A life. A family. A love that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something profound and unshakable. The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of their children's lives. William, at 15, was accepted into a school in Cheyenne with assistance from Edward Thornton, who had become a friend and unofficial uncle to the Bridger children. It nearly broke Violet's heart to let him go, but she and Benjamin both knew it was important for William to have opportunities they couldn't provide in the mountains. Daniel had no interest in formal education beyond the basics. At 13, he was his father's constant companion, learning everything about leathercraft and wilderness survival. Benjamin taught him the business side too, how to negotiate prices and maintain customer relationships, preparing him to eventually take over if he wanted. Grace, at 11, remained a puzzle and a delight. She was brilliant like William, physical like Daniel, but entirely her own person. She announced one day that she wanted to be a doctor, which shocked everyone. "Women can't be doctors," Daniel said skeptically. "Yes, they can. Miss Margaret is practically a doctor, and there are medical colleges that accept women now. I read about them in Papa's newspapers." Benjamin ruffled her blonde hair affectionately. "If you want to be a doctor, Gracie, we'll find a way to make it happen. You're smart enough and determined enough. Just have to work hard and not let anyone tell you it's impossible." When Benjamin was 42 and Violet 37, they received news that Benjamin's mother had passed away in Pennsylvania. His sisters wrote asking him to come for the funeral, but by the time the letter arrived, the funeral had already happened. Benjamin was quiet for days, processing the loss of a woman he hadn't seen in over 20 years, but who had loved him in her own way. "I should have visited," he said one night. "Should have taken you and the children to meet her. She would have loved you all." "She knew about us," Violet reminded him gently. "We sent her letters. She saw the photographs we had made. She knew you were happy and loved. That matters, I suppose." Benjamin sighed. "My sisters want me to come back, claim my inheritance. Apparently, Mother left me a third of everything. Do you want to go?" "No, my life is here. My family is here. What would I do with a cobbler's shop in Pennsylvania?" He looked at Violet. "But the money might be useful. For William's education. For Grace's medical school if she still wants that. For Daniel, if he decides he wants something different than the mountains. Then we'll arrange to sell your portion and have the money transferred. Your sisters will understand." The inheritance, when it arrived, was substantial enough to secure the children's futures and then some. Benjamin and Violet invested it carefully, ensuring that their children would have choices and opportunities while maintaining the simple mountain life they loved. William excelled in school and eventually attended university in Denver, studying law as he had always wanted. He wrote home regularly, long letters full of ideas and plans and dreams. Daniel took over more of the leather craft business as Benjamin's hands developed arthritis, proving to have a natural talent for both creation and commerce. Grace continued her education through correspondence courses and hours of study with her mother, preparing for the medical college admission exams. When Grace was 18, she was accepted into the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia. Violet cried for a week, torn between pride and the knowledge that her only daughter would be gone for years. Benjamin handled it with his usual practical approach, building Grace a beautiful leather trunk for her belongings and filling it with everything she might need. The night before Grace left, the whole family gathered for dinner. William had come home from Denver for the occasion, and they were all together one last time before scattering to their separate paths. "I want to say something," Benjamin announced, standing at the head of the table. "Your mother and I built this family from nothing. We had no money, no connections, no advantages, just determination and love for each other. And look at you now. William, you're going to be a lawyer fighting for justice. Daniel, you're running a successful business and living the life you choose. Grace, you're going to be a doctor healing people and saving lives. We're so proud of all of you, so incredibly proud." "We learned from the best," William said simply. "You taught us to work hard, to be kind, to help people who need help. Everything we are comes from you." "And from Mama," Grace added, reaching for Violet's hand. "She taught us to value education, to question things, to believe we could be more than what the world expected." Daniel, never comfortable with emotional speeches, just nodded firmly. "You're good parents, the best. And this will always be home, no matter where we go." That night, after the children were asleep, Benjamin and Violet lay in bed holding each other. "They're leaving us," Violet whispered. "They're living their lives. That's what we raised them to do. I know, but it hurts." "It does," Benjamin agreed. "But it's a good hurt, the kind that means we did something right." With the children grown and mostly gone, Benjamin and Violet rediscovered each other in new ways. They had time for long walks through the mountains, for reading entire books aloud without interruption, for staying in bed late on cold mornings, just talking and holding each other. They had built their love in the chaos of raising a family, but now they could nurture it in the quiet spaces they had created. Benjamin was 50 when his arthritis got bad enough that he had to stop doing detailed leather work. He hated the limitation at first, frustrated by hands that wouldn't obey his commands. But Violet helped him adjust, finding new projects he could manage and new ways to stay productive. "You've made enough shoes and boots and belts for a lifetime," she told him. "Maybe it's time to just enjoy the fruits of your labor. I'm not good at sitting idle." "Then don't sit idle. Teach. Write down everything you know about leather craft so Daniel can pass it on to his children someday. Garden. Take care of the property. Spend time with me. There's plenty to do that doesn't require precise hand movements." So Benjamin adapted, as he always had. He wrote detailed guides to leather craft techniques, illustrated with drawings that his stiff hands could still manage. He improved the cabin and property in small ways, always building, always creating. He spent hours with Violet, making up for the time they had lost to the demands of parenthood and work. Violet, at 45, discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise neither of them had anticipated. The pregnancy was difficult, her body older and less resilient than it had been with the previous children. Dr. Margaret Ellis, herself now in her 60s, insisted Violet move to town for the last month to be close to medical care. Benjamin rented a small house in Sheridan and stayed with her, refusing to leave her side. Daniel came from the mountains regularly to check on them. William took time off from his law practice in Denver. Grace, in her 3rd year of medical school, couldn't leave Philadelphia but sent anxious letters every few days. The birth was long and complicated, and for several terrifying hours, Benjamin thought he might lose both Violet and the baby. But Margaret Ellis was skilled and experienced, and when it was over, Violet was weak but alive, holding another son. They named him Samuel after no one in particular. They just liked the name. He was a tiny baby, smaller than his siblings had been, but healthy and strong-lunged. Benjamin held him with tears streaming down his face, grateful beyond words that Violet had survived. "No more," he told her firmly. "I can't go through that again. I can't risk losing you." "No more," Violet agreed, exhausted but smiling. 4 children are plenty, more than plenty." Samuel grew up in a quieter household than his siblings had known, with parents who were older and more settled. But he was loved fiercely by everyone. His older siblings doted on him, traveling home whenever possible to spend time with their baby brother. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and a personality that was gentle and thoughtful. As Benjamin and Violet aged, they grew closer rather than apart. They had faced so much together, built so much from nothing, survived losses and celebrated triumphs. Every gray hair and wrinkle was earned, was part of their story. On a warm June evening when Benjamin was 62 and Violet 57, they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset. Samuel, now 12 years old, was inside reading. Their older children were scattered across the country, living their own lives but staying connected through letters and occasional visits. "You remember the shoes?" Violet asked suddenly. Benjamin smiled. "The first ones I made you. Of course I remember. I still have them, actually. Put away in a trunk. Really, after all these years, they were important, the beginning of everything. Couldn't throw them away." Violet reached over and took his hand, the gesture as natural now as breathing. "I was so lost when you found me. Bloody feet, no hope, no future. And you saw someone worth helping, worth saving. You saved yourself. I just made you some shoes. You made me a life, Benjamin Bridger. You made me a home and a family and showed me what love should be. Those shoes were just the beginning." "Best thing I ever made," Benjamin said softly. "Not the shoes themselves, but what they led to. You, us, all of this." He gestured at the cabin, the mountains, the life they had built. "I was hiding up here, pretending I didn't need anyone. Then you walked into my life with bloody feet and green eyes and changed everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold and purple. Somewhere in the cabin, Samuel turned a page of his book. In Denver, William was probably working late in his law office. In the mountains on the other side of the valley, Daniel was likely finishing up in the workshop. In Philadelphia, Grace was studying for exams, driven and determined as ever. This was their legacy, Violet thought. Not just the children themselves, but the values they had instilled. Kindness, hard work, integrity, the courage to help people who needed help, to build something meaningful, to love without reservation. "I would do it all again," she said. "Every hard day, every struggle, every moment of fear or doubt, I would do it all again to end up right here with you." "Me too," Benjamin said. "Every single bit of it." As darkness fell and stars began to appear, they remained on the porch, hands clasped, watching the night sky together. They had started with nothing but bloody feet and a promise to make shoes. They had built a life, a love, a family that would continue long after they were gone. Inside the cabin, Samuel marked his place in his book and came to the door. "Mama, Papa, are you coming inside?" "In a minute, son," Benjamin called back. "We're just watching the stars." Samuel joined them on the porch, settling between his parents with the easy trust of a well-loved child. Violet put her arm around him, and Benjamin pulled them both close. This was everything, Violet thought. This moment, this family, this love. A mountain man had measured her feet and made her first pair of shoes, and in doing so, had given her the world. Years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of mountain life. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's practicality with his mother's love of learning. At 18, he surprised everyone by announcing he wanted to study engineering, fascinated by the bridges and buildings transforming the American landscape. Benjamin and Violet, now in their 60s, supported his decision as they had supported all their children's dreams. The money from Benjamin's leather business and his mother's inheritance meant they could afford to send Samuel to a good school without hardship. William had become a successful lawyer in Denver, married to a kind schoolteacher named Catherine, and they had 3 children who visited the mountain cabin every summer. Daniel had married a woman from Sheridan named Sarah who loved the mountains as much as he did, and they lived a few miles from Benjamin and Violet's original cabin, running the leather goods business that now employed several craftsmen. Grace had completed medical school and was practicing medicine in Chicago, one of the few female doctors in the city, fighting every day to prove herself worthy of her calling. On Benjamin and Violet's 30th wedding anniversary, all the children came home. It took planning and coordination, but they managed it. 3 days in late September when the aspens were turning gold and the air was crisp with approaching autumn. The cabin was full to bursting with children and grandchildren, with laughter and noise and life. Violet cooked enormous meals with help from her daughters-in-law and Grace. Benjamin taught his grandchildren to whittle, his arthritic hands still capable enough for the basics. In the evenings, they all gathered around the fireplace while William read aloud from books, continuing the tradition their mother had started decades ago. On the anniversary itself, Benjamin gave Violet a gift that made her cry. It was a new pair of shoes, made with the same care and precision as that first pair so many years ago, but adapted for her older feet with extra cushioning and support. "So you can keep walking with me," he said simply, "for as long as we both can." Violet held the shoes to her chest, overwhelmed. "They're perfect. You're perfect. Not perfect, just yours." That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Benjamin and Violet walked outside under the stars, Violet wearing her new shoes. They walked the familiar paths they had walked for 3 decades, their steps slower now but no less certain. "You have any regrets?" Violet asked. Benjamin thought about it seriously, as he always did when she asked important questions. "I regret that I can't do all the things I used to do. That my hands don't work as well, that I get tired easier. But those aren't real regrets, just frustrations with aging. Real regrets? No. I lived the life I wanted with the person I love. What's there to regret? I used to regret that my father never saw me happy. That my mother didn't live to meet you or her grandchildren. But you're right, those aren't real regrets. Just wishes for things that couldn't be." They stopped at their favorite overlook, the spot where they could see for miles across the valley to the distant peaks. This was their place, their home, their kingdom built from love and labor and unwavering commitment. "Thank you," Benjamin said suddenly. "For what?" "For saying yes when I asked you to stay. For trusting me when you had no reason to. For building this life with me. For giving me children and purpose and more happiness than I ever imagined possible. For everything." Violet turned to face him, her green eyes bright in the moonlight. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for making me shoes when I had nothing, for loving me when I felt unlovable, for showing me that good men exist and that love can be real and lasting, for being my partner and my home." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 30 years of love and commitment and shared history. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "Let's go back," Violet said. "Our family is waiting, and I want to spend every moment with them while they are here." Hand in hand, they walked back to the cabin full of light and warmth and the voices of the people they loved most. This was their greatest creation, Benjamin thought. Not the leather goods that bore his name, not the cabin or the business or any material thing. This family, built on the foundation of two people who had found each other when they needed each other most. This love that had grown and deepened and multiplied across generations. Benjamin lived to be 72, active and engaged until a stroke took him suddenly one autumn morning. He had been working in the workshop, teaching his grandson the finer points of leather stitching, when he simply collapsed. Daniel, who was there within minutes, said he was gone before he hit the ground. No suffering, no pain, just a sudden stop to a life well lived. Violet held herself together through the funeral, through the gathering of children and grandchildren and friends, who came to pay respects to the mountain man, who had helped so many people over the years. She held herself together through the burial in a spot overlooking the valley he had loved, under the pine trees that had sheltered their home. But at night, alone in the bed they had shared for over 40 years, she wept. For the loss of her partner, her love, her best friend. For the empty space beside her that would never be filled. For all the conversations they would never have and walks they would never take and moments they would never share. Her children wanted her to move to town, to live with one of them where she wouldn't be alone. But Violet refused. This cabin, these mountains, this life were what she and Benjamin had built together. She wouldn't abandon it just because he was gone. "I'll be fine," she told them firmly. "I've lived in these mountains for over 40 years. I know how to take care of myself, and I'm not ready to leave our home." So they compromised. Daniel and Sarah, whose own home was nearby, checked on her daily. Samuel, who had returned from his engineering work in California when his father died, stayed for several months to make sure she was managing. Grace took a leave from her medical practice to spend time with her mother. William visited as often as his practice allowed. Slowly, Violet adjusted to life alone. She kept busy with the garden, with reading, with correspondence with her far-flung children and grandchildren. She took walks every day wearing the shoes Benjamin had made for her, feeling close to him on the paths they had walked together. One day, going through Benjamin's workshop, she found the trunk he had mentioned years ago. Inside, carefully wrapped in cloth, were the first shoes he had ever made her. She held them with trembling hands, remembering the day he had measured her bloody feet with such gentle care, remembering how those shoes had been the beginning of everything good in her life. She was crying when Daniel found her, clutching the worn leather shoes to her chest. "Mama," he said gently, "are you all right? These were the first shoes I ever owned," she told him through tears. "Your father made them for me the week we met. I walked 40 miles on bare feet from your grandfather's grave, and your father saw me bleeding and decided to help. These shoes changed my life." Daniel knelt beside her, looking at the worn shoes with new understanding. "Tell me the story," he said. "The whole story from the beginning." So Violet told him everything, about her father's death in the collapsed mine, about walking to Sheridan with bloody feet, about Benjamin stepping into her path and insisting she needed help, about the careful way he measured her feet and the precision with which he crafted the shoes, about falling in love while he worked and she read aloud, about building a life from nothing but determination and love. Daniel listened, seeing his parents' story with adult eyes for the first time. "That's beautiful, Mama. You should write it down. For the grandchildren so they know where they came from." Violet considered this. "Maybe I will. Maybe that's what I need to do with my time now. Tell our story so it's not forgotten." She spent the next year writing, filling page after page with memories and stories and the history of her life with Benjamin. She wrote about hardship and hope, about love and loss, about the mountain man who had made her shoes and given her the world. When she finished, she had a manuscript hundreds of pages long, the complete story of their life together. Grace, visiting from Chicago, read it with tears streaming down her face. "Mama, this is extraordinary. You should try to get it published." "It's just our story. Nothing special." "It's everything special. It's about kindness and love and building something meaningful from nothing. People need to read this." With Grace's help, Violet sent the manuscript to publishers. To her amazement, one accepted it. The book was published 2 years after Benjamin's death, titled simply, "The Shoes He Made." It sold modestly but steadily, touching people who read about the mountain man and the woman with bloody feet who found each other and built a life. Violet lived to be 81, remaining in the mountain cabin until the very end. She was surrounded by her children when she died peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, the manuscript of a second book on her bedside table, more stories she had wanted to tell. They buried her next to Benjamin, under the pines overlooking the valley. At the funeral, William read a passage from her book, the part about the first time Benjamin measured her feet and promised to make her shoes. "She never forgot that moment," William said. "It was when she realized that kindness existed, that good people were real, that she deserved help and care and love. Everything that came after, the marriage and the children and the life they built, it all started with one man seeing someone in need and deciding to help. That was our Father's greatest gift to her and through her to all of us. He taught us to see people who need help and to do something about it." Years later, the cabin still stood, maintained by the family as a reminder of where they came from. Daniel's grandchildren played in the workshop where Benjamin had crafted leather goods. William's great-grandchildren read from the books Violet had loved. Grace's descendants pursued medicine, continuing her legacy of healing. And in a museum in Cheyenne, in a case marked Wyoming Heritage, sat a pair of worn leather shoes. The card beside them read, "First shoes made by Benjamin Bridger for Violet Sawyer, 1876. These shoes represent a love story that began with an act of kindness and grew into a family legacy." The shoes themselves were crafted with care for a young woman who had never owned shoes in her life. In making them, the craftsman found his life's partner, and together they built a life in the Wyoming mountains that exemplified the best of the American spirit: hard work, compassion, resilience, and love. The shoes remained there for generations, a testament to a simple act that had changed two lives and created a legacy. They were just shoes, worn and old and carefully preserved. But they represented something much larger: the power of kindness, the strength of love, and the beautiful things that can grow when someone sees another person's need and decides to help. A mountain man had measured a woman's feet and made her first pair of shoes by hand. In doing so, he had given her everything: protection, dignity, hope, and eventually, a love that lasted a lifetime and echoed through generations. The shoes were just the beginning, but they were the beginning of everything that mattered.